What's up, everybody? I'm sorry I am hopping on late. This was supposed to start at, I think, 12:45. What's up, everybody? I know this was supposed to start at 12:45, but I was on a podcast with a guest. If you guys don't know, I'm a co-host of a podcast called No BS Fitness Prescription, and we bring on qualified fitness coaches and professionals in the fitness industry to give you guys a no nonsense um, view on whatever topic they are an expert in and pretty much get real advice that can help you take your fitness to the next level because there are a ton of uh, information. There is a ton of information out there in the fitness industry that pretty much is just based on sound bites and doesn't give you the context and the nuance and the nitty gritty details that really transform your journey. So, if you want to check out that podcast, I'll link it in the comments. But with that being said, let's get into the FAQ. So, I got 3 questions that people submitted. So, we'll go through those. And if you have any that you want to add while I am on live, drop them in the comments and I'll answer them live. So, first question was, what is the best exercise advice for those with PCOS, particularly the stomach that won't go away? Bonus points if you know what foods we should stay away from due to the insulin resistance. So, this is a good question. PCOS is a huge topic right now. And first things first, I do want to say with PCOS, there's no exercise in particular that is going to help the stomach go away. When it comes to having insulin resistance, those hormonal changes are what causes more weight gain and fat gain around your midsection. So there's no specific exercises that are necessarily going to help with that. And that leads me into what I really want to discuss about PCOS. So, for those who don't know what PCOS is, it's basically a hormonal condition that's going to impact how your ovaries function and then how your body regulates different hormones in your metabolism. So, that's going to change things like your menstrual cycle, um, different hormone levels, obviously, and also how your body handles insulin. And it's going to show up differently in different people. This is why symptoms and how you treat it isn't going to be a one size fits all. And I do want to say this is not medical advice. I am not a endocrinologist. I'm a physical therapist and a certified strength and conditioning coach. So I'm going to tell you my thoughts on just a very holistic level, but this is not medical advice. I do want to say everybody who has PCOS does not have insulin resistance. PCOS is a spectrum and it doesn't present the same way in every person. Some people have insulin resistance as clear as day. Other people don't have any insulin resistance. Their A1C levels are fine. And some people fall in between. And this is why it's really important to get blood work. A lot of doctors are just diagnosing women with PCOS, but they don't necessarily have the blood work to prove that they even have some of these symptoms that go along with PCOS, right? So instead of guessing, you always want to get objective data. You want to know what your fasting insulin level is. You want to know what your fasting glucose level is, your A1C. You want to know these things because that's going to determine if you're even insulin resistant or not. And then, regardless of if you're insulin resistant or you're not, PCOS and the way you handle it is going to go based on your habits, your lifestyle habits, like anything else. People tend to, I guess, resonate really well with these labels. Like they get told they have PCOS and now they're tied to it. Now they think they have to train a certain way because they have PCOS. When really, in reality, it just comes down to habits. And if you take the habits that you should be doing in general, just to sustain a healthy life, you're going to be pretty well off despite having PCOS or despite being diagnosed with PCOS. When it comes to the exercises you should do, your training should be guided on just general training principles. So you should be trying to hit all muscle groups twice a week, right? Whether that is you working out 2 times a week doing full body, 3 times a week full body. You can be doing a 4-day split and doing 2 uppers, 2 lowers. But really, you want to make sure you're hitting all your muscle groups twice a week. You're applying progressive overload, and you are making sure you recover really well in between those sessions. And recovery is a big thing because when you're dealing with weight that doesn't get off in your midsection, a common way to that people try to get it off with is just increasing the type of exercise they do. They start to do a ton more cardio, like high intensity cardio, but they don't realize that that's also putting additional stress on your body. And if your hormones are a little wacky with PCOS, it's going to kind of work against you. So you have to make sure that your recovery is in line and that your training program is not something that's inhibiting your recovery. So if you're lifting 3 days a week and then you're doing intense cardio 3 days as well, like HIIT sessions, you're not going to be able to recover from that in the way that you should, especially if the habits that I'm going to talk about is not in place. So you really have to have good programming. I say all that to say you just have to have good programming, and that goes for anybody who wants to sustain a fitness journey for a long period of time. When it comes to insulin resistance, muscle mass is going to be one of the biggest ways you can manage insulin resistance, because the more muscle you have, the more carbohydrates your muscle sucks up. So that helps with controlling your insulin levels. So that's why the focus of exercise with PCOS and really just all women's health or just health in general is putting on more muscle, because the more muscle you have, the more sensitive your body is to insulin. It's going to improve your insulin sensitivity. And if you do have insulin resistance on blood work, it should improve the more muscle mass that you put on. So hitting those muscle groups 2 times a week with progressive overload with a really good program, in addition to the habits that we're going to talk about, is going to be really, really important. When it comes to the nutritional aspect of things, like I said before, people think they have to train a certain way. And people think they have to eat a certain way just because they have PCOS, but it really just comes down to habits. Okay? Protein intake is going to sound very cliche, but protein intake, you should be getting 0.75 to 1 gram per pound of body weight in protein. That is standard across the board. Just because you have PCOS, it does not make it any different. That's a standard thing. Then when it comes to carbohydrates and fats, that's going to vary based on if you are actually insulin resistant or not. And what people tend to get confused is they think just because you're insulin resistant, you don't eat carbs. That's not true at all. What really happens when you're insulin resistant is you have to really pay attention to the types of carbs you're eating and the timing of things and the pairing of carbs with different macronutrients. So I don't want you to think that you have to stay away or avoid certain foods because of insulin resistance, because that's a common misconception. People think they just need to avoid carbs, but the structure of your nutrition is going to matter more than the restriction of it. So what's gonna help most with insulin resistance and just with PCOS in general is going to be adequate protein at meals. So 0.75 to 1 gram of protein per body weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you should aim to get at least 150 grams of protein. Then you want to establish a consistent eating schedule. Consistent eating schedule, eating carbs, fats, and proteins at every meal. Because just eating carbs by itself, especially if it's a refined carb, which we're going to get into in a couple of minutes, is if you're eating that all the time, your insulin levels are just going to spike up. Your blood sugar is going to spike up, and you're going to be very sensitive to that if you are really insulin resistant. So take somebody who's like type 2 diabetic. They're going to be very sensitive to those things, because when you eat these types of carbs by itself, they go straight to your blood sugar, and they don't really have any like fiber to kind of offset that. So the types of carbs is going to be important. Next is making sure that you are, yes, having consistent eating times, but making sure that you're paying attention to the types of carbs you're eating. I mentioned that they spike your blood sugar, but not all carbs are going to be bad for you. You want to stay away from the refined carbs. So we're talking like, this is gonna sound crazy, but like muffins, donuts, pastries, sugary cereals that don't really have any protein in them, candy, a lot of gummies, potato chips or crackers that are eaten by itself, sugary drinks. These are things that are going to really spike up your blood sugar, and it's going to be hard to control that and like get a handle on that if you're only eating these things by itself. So this is where the protein comes into play. Another thing is fiber. People don't realize that fiber, a lot of carbs have fiber, and when you eat fiber, they kind of level out your blood sugar. So if you eat like a donut, your blood sugar is going to spike up. But if you were to eat a carb that has a little bit more fiber, instead of having that spike, you're gonna have this kind of like spike, and then it's like kind of gonna level out. That's what you want when you have any type of insulin resistance. So I don't want you to think about what you should avoid. I think you should more so think about it as, how do you pair certain foods together. So you should always have a protein, preferably a lean protein, depending on what your macros are, but like a lean protein, a carb, and a fat. So a simple meal would be grilled chicken, some type of chicken, beef, lean ground beef, turkey, one of those proteins, and then like brown rice and a veggie. That's a simple thing that you can do. It becomes problematic when people don't have these foundational habits, and then they're just eating on the go, and they're not really hitting their protein intake. They're just eating random carbs, and their blood sugars all over the place. So it's not really about what you should stay away from. It's more so about organizing your meals to kind of have a more holistic view or holistic approach to your nutrition. And if you do that, you'll notice that you're dealing with your PCOS symptoms well, and insulin resistance symptoms well. Uh, yeah, so basically, lifting weights consistently, hitting protein intake, pairing a carb with the protein when you eat, and establishing consistent eating schedules so that your blood sugar is pretty much stable throughout the day. When it comes to the stubborn belly fat that goes along with PCOS, if you can improve your hormones, that stubborn belly fat can improve as well, as long as obviously you're in a calorie deficit. But typically with insulin resistance across the board, whether it's PCOS, diabetes, or other things that have that as a defining characteristic, you're going to notice that until you improve that insulin resistance, you're going to hold weight in that area. That's just something classic of that presentation or that symptom. Next question was, what's your favorite high protein recipe when you're doing a cut? I need some ideas I haven't tried yet. Cottage cheese free ideas. So my answer might be unpopular, I don't know, but I personally don't have specific high protein cut recipes, because when I'm in a cut, the foods that I eat don't change from when I'm in maintenance or when I'm in a surplus. Only the quantities of those foods are going to change. So I pretty much eat the same things. And most people tend to get stuck looking for special high protein meals and recipes because they haven't really learned how to organize their meals to hit their protein across the day. So they think a specific recipe is going to get them there. So instead of thinking of recipes, I would think more so in what I call it, protein anchors. Like anchor your meals around protein. So the way I do it and the way I teach my clients how to do it is, think about how much protein you need to get throughout the day. What is your daily protein goal? I'm going to use me, for example. My daily protein goal is 170 grams. It's very hard for me to hit, it will be very hard for me to hit 170 grams if I don't plan for it. So this is why this is so important, because people think it's hard to get protein in. It's only hard if you don't plan. So think about what amount of protein you have to get throughout the day. I have 170 grams. Write down all of the protein sources that you like to eat in general. Don't matter if you're in a cut, a bulk, you're trying to maintain. What protein sources do you enjoy eating? For me, I did this exercise myself. For me, I like to eat chicken breast or chicken thighs, preferably chicken thighs. If I'm gonna eat a chicken thigh, I know that it has more fat content, so the other protein sources and food items throughout my day are gonna be on the lower fat side because my macros, I'm not gonna try to go over my fat macros, right? So that's something I have to think about with chicken thighs. When Also, let me finish listing the things that I like so you guys can see how to use this exercise for yourself. I like eating lean ground beef because I got sick and tired of ground turkey. Oh my god, I still eat ground turkey, but I got tired of it, so switched back to ground beef. I'm eating ground beef or ground turkey, and I try to get the leanest cut, so like a 96.4 ground beef, ground turkey 93.7. I like to eat shrimp, salmon, tuna, eggs, and egg whites. Egg whites are a sneaky way to get protein in, which I will talk about in a few minutes. So, after you list all of the protein that you enjoy eating, we're not thinking about, hey, I'm in a cut, this is what I can eat. We're just talking about protein sources in general. Get the cut out of your head for a second. Protein sources you like to eat, all right? And then from there, if I know that I'm going to eat 3 meals a day, 3 big meals a day, not including snacks, 3 big meals a day, I'm trying to organize my meals to get me as close to 170 grams as possible. So this is what I did for earlier in the week. So I had egg whites, 360 grams, 2 eggs, which was about 12 grams of protein. That's for breakfast. And then I pair that with a fruit. And sometimes if I'm making eggs, I'll either do an omelet or like scrambled eggs with veggies, peppers, things like that in it, and eat it together like that. We're just talking about protein right now, by the way. Then for lunch, 6 ounces of grilled chicken. I had 7 ounces of lean ground beef, and I also had some high protein. I don't even know how to say it. Oikos yogurt. I really like that yogurt. So with all of that just planned out, I have 162 grams of protein. So now that I know how much protein that I have, I can then assign what veggies and carbs I want to eat with each protein. It's going to be different because depending on what your macros are during your cut, you're going to have more carbs compared to fats and vice versa. When I am in an aggressive cut, I tank my carbs down really low. So I'm eating more veggies alongside those proteins instead of things like brown rice or sweet potatoes. So I say all that to say it doesn't really matter what your carbs are because you can always tweak the quantities of it. But if you're thinking about a high protein recipe, like putting cottage cheese and things is not going to give you like a ton of protein. It's something that's smart to do after you have already established the proteins you want to eat throughout the day, like I just did. And then I got to 162 grams. All I need now is to find ways to give me 8 grams more of protein. And that's when you can start to add in cottage cheese into things. People sneak cottage cheese into eggs. I haven't done that, but I have snuck egg whites into oatmeal. But I'm only doing that after I have planned out my protein. So I say all that to say, plan your protein first, like what you want to eat, and then assign quantities that allow you to get to that protein goal. And then once you establish the protein, you can easily fit snacks in to help you get those extra like 10 to 15 grams of protein. Then you can add your veggies and your carbs and your fats, but the protein comes first. So I don't do high protein recipes. I think that's just I don't want to sound rude or dismissive of the question, but I think that's just the way that people try to like override the fact that they don't know how to assign or don't know how to allocate protein to hit their daily allowance of protein. So protein first, then plan everything around that, and then you can start doing like sneaky ways like cottage cheese with your egg whites, cottage cheese for a snack, different ways to sneak in protein would be like a protein supplement, like a half of a scoop of whey protein in like a fruit smoothie. Things like that are going to give you a little bit of protein, but you cannot build your entire day off of that. So I'm not really a big fan of the high protein recipes because I think it's like a negligible amount. Start planning your protein throughout the day, like ahead of time, and then fill in the blanks from there. I hope that makes sense. And then next question is next and last question is, when it comes to progressive overload, is it better to increase reps or weights? So this depends on the goal. So when I say that, I mean if somebody is trying to do a prep for a powerlifting competition, you're pretty much gonna live for like your squat, bench, and deadlift. You're gonna live in like the 3 to 5, 3 to 6, maybe 3 to 8 rep range, right? Because you're going for maximal strength. You're trying to lift the most weight possible for 1 rep. So you want to stay within those lower rep ranges and higher weights, right? But then your accessories, you are going to do a little bit higher reps. I don't mean like 20 reps. I mean like 8 to 15 reps for like your accessory exercises. But if your goal is to build muscle or any other goal, you're gonna you can fluctuate between all of those things that we talked about. It's a greater range that you can work in. When it comes to progressive overload, people think that it's just increasing reps and increasing weight or adding more sets. It's never a one or the other solution. It's usually both. And the way that I train personally and the way that I coach my clients to train is to use rep ranges and reps in reserve, because this is what keeps you progressing the right way, whether it's progression that shows up in adding more reps or adding more weight. And this works really well when you're in the beginner phase or intermediate phase where you haven't like maxed out of the top end weight of what you can use on the exercise. So an example I'm going to give is, let's say you're doing goblet squats and your rep range is 12 to 15 reps and you are using 50 pounds and you're hitting 15 reps with ease. Like you get to rep 15 and you still feel like you can do 5 more reps. It doesn't make sense to increase the reps on that exercise when you can just go up in weight. So going up in weight, you have 2 options. You can increase the weight to something where 12 to 15 reps is challenging again. So if you were using 50 pounds, now you're using maybe 55 or 60. Maybe that extra 5 to 10 pound jump is now challenging for that same rep range. Or you can make a bigger jump and decrease your rep range to like 6 to 10. So instead of using 50, now you're using 70 and you're aiming for the 6 to 10 rep range. Both ways include increasing the weight. Once you're in the higher rep range of like 12 to 15, there's no point in increasing the reps unless you're doing like an isolation exercise of like a hip abduction or a lateral raise where you can do like 20 or so reps. But if you're doing a compound exercise, something like a squat, a split squat, deadlifts, like RDLs, hip thrusts, those types of things, you don't need to be doing more than 15 reps. So if you get to that point, don't think increase reps. Think increase the weight, and it's okay if you increase the weight so much that you have to hit a lower rep range. It's still going to be beneficial to you because there's more workload on your body. So if you were to be doing, let's say, 8 to 10 or like 6 to 10 reps of an exercise, then you can go and say like, hey, I've been doing 10, maybe I'm going to do 12 this time. I do that with Bulgarian split squats. Like if I can't go up in weight because my grip is limiting me, then I'll just go up in reps. But I'm not doing more than 15 reps of that exercise. So you really have to take it case by case. I would say once you max out that rep range, try to increase the weight. And if you increase the weight, either increase it to something that is still challenging for that rep range you were in, or something that's challenging for a lower rep range. If it's a heavier weight, you're still benefiting by doing more. People get hung up on the idea of progressive overload only being increasing weight or increasing reps and sets. Exercise dependent is going to be dependent on how you feel that day, because not every day you're going to be able to just increase the weight. What I just said, the example I shared, may not be possible that day. Like you may be doing 6 to 10 reps with 70 pounds, but you may not be able to do 75 that day. So then you can increase the weight. I mean, increase the reps. So instead of doing 6 to 10, you can do 8 to 12. That's still an increase, but you have to take it day by day. You just have to know why you're doing certain things. And then eventually you're going to get to a point where adding both weight and reps or even a set isn't the thing you should be doing. And that's when more options of progressive overload come into play. So this is when you start using different tempos. This is when you maybe progress the range of motion of an exercise. Maybe you do a more advanced exercise variation. A simple example of this is people jump straight to Bulgarian split squats. Before Bulgarian split squats, you should master a split squat. But once you have mastered a split squat and you have loaded that up a ton, your next progression can be a Bulgarian split squat. Another progression that people kind of don't see as progressive overload is if you're doing a reverse lunge and you have maxed out on the weight you can use or the rep range, you can then do a elevated split squat, right? So when you're standing on a box and you're doing a reverse lunge off the box, that's going to increase the range of motion. So if your muscles have to work through more range of motion, they're working harder. That is an example of progressive overload. So it's not just progressing the weight, the reps, the sets. It's more so trying to make whatever you are doing harder in a way that is conducive to your goals. And there's many different ways to do it. So I share all that to say there's different ways and you have to pick the one that works for you. You should pretty much exhaust the time that you can with increasing the weight and increasing the reps. But if you're lifting long enough, you're not going to be able to increase the reps anymore. You're not going to be able to increase the weight, and you have to do something else. If that was not the case, then everybody would be lifting 500 pounds now. If you train long enough, you should be lifting 500 pounds. But we know that that's not reality. So this is when programming comes into play and different ways to progressive overload. But until you get to that point, just increase the reps within the rep range and increase the weight. And then if you need advanced programming strategies, you can find that in the Lifter's Blueprint. And that is actually linked below already, so you can grab that or just message me for it. I'll send you the link. It's $27. You get lifetime access to it as I add more insights, information, and training strategies to help you along your lifting journey. And I will be going live every 2 weeks in this group. Next one is going to be some demo videos on some things to take your lower body training to the next level, because a lot of people have really good training programs on paper, but they're not seeing the results they want when it comes to their glute and quad development because they are not executing those exercises correctly. And there's a lot of things that may seem like very nitpicky things, but it's really going to be crucial for you to hone in on and dial in if you really want to maximize your lower body training and development, whether it's you growing muscle or getting stronger. So definitely tune into that. I'll be posting about it as it gets closer. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this FAQ, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.